having a sample API is a useful tool when learning web development, something you can test your front end against. In this course, we're going to be building a sample API that you can use both locally and via the web. Along the way, we are learning how to build and deploy a minimal API in C#. When we're done, we'll have built an API with sample data that is documented, has health checks, simulates slowdowns and errors, and is deployed both as a Docker container and as a web application on a virtual private server. The end result will be a tool you can use in testing for your own apps. In this lesson, we're going to implement health checks so that if your app checks on the health status of a service, you can test out the various responses. So let's jump right in. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to using just the API. We don't need to have the UI anymore launch. So we'll launch just the API from now on. And we're also going to right-click on dependencies, manage NuGet packages, go to browse, and we're going to search for the ASP.NET Core.Health checks.ui.client. So this is going to have some abstractions for us for creating the UI client. We're going to look at this in just a minute, but this is going to allow us to do two different styles of health checks. That way you can test either one when you are testing your health checks or you're testing your app for health check status. So once you've installed that, what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a folder in our sample API that's for our health checks. So health checks. And what this will be is a place where we can put different types of checks that we're going to create. So the first one's going to be healthy health check.cs. So this is going to be a file that is going to say, yes, this is healthy. So I health check, which adds a using directive for Microsoft Extensions diagnostic health checks. Then we're going to implement that. So we're creating a custom health check here. And let's put this on a new line so you can actually see the whole thing. All we need to do is modify this method that is the implementation of iHealthCheck. And to do that, we're going to say return task from result. And let's do a new line. We'll say health check result dot healthy, and we'll give a message. This is a test healthy service. There we go. So what's going to happen is whenever you call this health check, the healthy health check, it's always going to return healthy with a message, this is a test healthy service. So that's all it does. It returns a health of healthy, which, this is obviously not real life. Like this is not what you'd actually do in this spot right here. You actually check the health of your service in some way. This might be a SQL check where you go out and call SQL and make sure the data is there or make sure SQL is running. It might be a check on your cache, or it might be a check on some files or Azure storage or whatever. But in our case, we're just saying, no, we're going to simulate a healthy service. That way, when you are testing, and you say, how will my site respond to a healthy service? You can call this health check and get a healthy response. So with that, we're going to create a few more health checks. Because obviously, if we have a healthy health check, we should probably have a degraded health check. And this is going to be just like our other one. So health check, and we're going to implement that. And again, we'll format it. And then in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this. So I'm going to paste it in, but instead of healthy, we're going to say degraded. And this is going to test this is a test degraded service. Okay. And now I'm actually going to copy all of this. And we're going to do it one more time. So let's, well, I should have done that way. There we go. We're going to say unhealthy. Health check. And make this a file scope namespace. And then I'm going to paste over these last bits. It's going to implement the interface. And this is now going to be unhealthy. And this is going to test, this is a test unhealthy service. Okay, so now we have a healthy service, an unhealthy service, and a degraded service we can test. One more we want to do, so let's do the random health check. So this is pretty close to the others. In fact, I will paste in our code again, but instead of this code right here, let's get rid of that. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to return a few different values. To do that, I'm going to say int random result equals random.shared.next 1 to 4. So we have 3 options to choose from. We have healthy, degraded, and unhealthy. So I want to get a 1 to 3 value. So on integer, notice this is an int, and I am going to say, give me from 1 to 4, but notice the max value is excluded, okay? So it's inclusive of 1, 2, and 3, but excludes 4. So therefore, this would give me the values I'm looking for. Now I can return the values I want. So I'm going to say return random result switch. Now this is a switch expression, not a switch statement. It's a little different. If you have not used it before, what a switch expression does is it bases off this value, and you can return a value for each result. So for 1, I can say task.fromResult, healthy health checks, health check result. So health check result dot healthy. So we'll choose, randomly, doesn't matter for us. This is a test random service. Okay, so I do want to say random here. I don't want to say healthy service. I want to say this is a random one, because that way, no matter which value returns, we know it came from the random service. So I'm going to put comma, and then I'm going to paste a second, third, and fourth value. So 2, 3, and the last one is the discard character, meaning anything else. Now I'll leave that one as healthy, but I want to have a degraded and an unhealthy. There we go. So if it's a 1, it returns healthy. If it's 2, it returns degraded. If it's 3, it returns unhealthy. If it's not one of those values, which should never happen, but if it does, we'll return healthy. That way, no matter what happens, we're covered, all right? So with that, we now have our random health check. Again, normally this code in here looks for, is something available? Is it too slow? Or is it not available? But in our case, we're just returning a random result, healthy, degraded, or unhealthy. So we now have 4 different health checks to choose from. So in our health checks folder, there's our 4 health checks. We can now start adding health checks to our app based upon these 4 health checks. So now let's go to the startup folder, and we're going to create a new class in here. Let's call it health checks config. And we're going to add a couple of methods in here. The first one, public static void. And by the way, let's make this static here as well. Static class. So public static void, and we'll say add all health checks. Yeah, add all health checks. It's fine. This iService collection, and we'll say services. So in here, we're going to add our health checks to the services. So we're going to say services.add health checks. And then we'll say on a new line, add check, random health check. Notice to add the using directive for the samples API health checks. And we're going to call this random. We're also going to give it a tag. So we're going to say tags. And then in square brackets, we can say random. That way we can filter later by just the random health checks. And we'll do this 3 more times. So we'll have the healthy. We will have the degraded. And we'll have the unhealthy. We'll make sure we put a semicolon at the end of that. And then we'll call it healthy, degraded, and unhealthy. So we'll have healthy health check. We will have the degraded health check, and we will have the unhealthy health check. So that adds those services to our dependency injection, which means that we've added health checks, and now we've added these specific services to our dependency injection for use as health checks. So now what we need to do is go over to our dependencies and say builder.services.add all health checks. And that will add all of our health checks to our dependency injection. Now we need one more method, public static void. And then this, what it's going to do is we're going to add all of our health checks. So let's call it map all health. There you go. Checks. You spell it right. This web application app. So again, we're going to, let's again spell it right. We're going to add a mapping for all of our health checks. And just so we can do this right now, we go to programs.cs, and in here, let's add this right with our mapping of endpoints. So map all health checks. So we've got our map all the health checks, add the different endpoints. Now, we don't have any health checks mapped yet, so let's go ahead and add the mapping for these. And this is where we can start simple. We can say app.map health checks and say /health. And that's going to take all of our health checks that we have added to our system and just kind of combine them into one resulting value. And that one resulting value is the lowest value. So if you have an unhealthy service, it will always say unhealthy. If you have a degraded service, but no unhealthy services, it would say degraded. And it's only if they're all healthy that it would say healthy. Now for us, it's always going to say unhealthy because we have an unhealthy service all the time. But let's just launch this and see it so we can see that yes, our health checks are working. So if instead of scalar /v1, we say health, it says unhealthy. All right. So that's working correctly. Now what we need to do is start breaking these out into other groups, right? So let's have one that's just for the healthy service, one that's for just a degraded service, one that's just for unhealthy, and so on. So we're going to say app.map health checks. And this is going to be /health/ and let's start with healthy. And here we're going to say new health check options, which I don't have a using directive for this. So it tried to add this whole thing in here. Let's just cut this out and control dot to add the using directive for it. So in here, we need to say curly braces, and we'll say predicate equals x arrow, fat arrow, x dot tags contains healthy. All right, so this is going to limit our health checks to only those that have a tag called healthy, which we only have one of those. That's the healthy health check. So if we say /health/healthy, we're going to get just the result of the healthy health check. Let's run this and see it in action. So first we'll go to health and see that it says unhealthy. And then we'll say /healthy, and it says healthy, which, yeah, that's not exactly, mind-blowing, right? Well, yes and no. What it's allowed us to do is see just one of our health checks, which means that we can do this again a couple more times. So that'll be for degraded, unhealthy, and random. So this is going to be degraded, and we will say only the tags that contain degraded. And this will be unhealthy, which we could just have put the UN in front. And this will be random. And this is actually the more interesting one of these. So let's run this again. And we're going to say /health. And let's just go straight to /degraded. And sure enough, it says degraded. Let's go to random. And it says degraded, unhealthy, healthy, unhealthy, healthy, unhealthy, healthy. So it can bounce back and forth randomly. So we now have 4 health checks. What this will allow you to do is have your app that's testing out for the health of a service. We can see different states. And so you can put this in part of your testing to see what would my app do if it got back a degraded state? What would my app do if it got back an unhealthy state? So you can test these different states by passing in the specific type of health check you want, or if you want to see what happens as things change, you can use the random one. Now, there is a UI you can add that adds more kind of stuff to the health check. What we're going to do is we're going to add that UI. I'm going to copy this line here, and we're going to come down, and below this, we're going to add this, and we're going to say /UI. And then we'll say new health check options, like before, but this time we're going to say response writer equals UI response writer, which adds a using directive at the top. All right. So then we're going to say dot write health check UI response. So this is going to write a health check UI response, which has more data. So let's just do /health/UI and see what that looks like. So we have /health/UI. And notice we have a lot of JSON here. We have status is unhealthy, the duration, whoops, don't want that. The duration of the call, we have entries here, so you have random. This is a random service we have, which was, by the way, was healthy. We have a healthy service, which was healthy. We have degraded service, which was degraded. And we have an unhealthy service, which was unhealthy. So it gives us all the information about all of our services in one. But we can go even further with this. Let's copy our 3 that are right here, or 4 that are right here, and paste them underneath the health checks we're going to add these as /UI in each case. So we're going to have a UI version of each of our subservices, which means we need to add this response writer for each of them. So you say comma and response writer underneath each of these. So I'll just paste that in for all of them. And now you can get the UI additional stuff for a specific health check. So again, if we run this, we can now see that if we go to health/UI/random, we now get the random, which says unhealthy. We hit refresh again. Now it says healthy. Okay, so this is just the random service if you wanted one service and you wanted to have a predictable value for that one service. So we've had a lot of health checks here. We've added a accumulation health check, which is always going to be unhealthy. We've added a specific health check for each type of state, healthy, degraded, unhealthy. We've added a random health check, and then we add the UI JSON equivalents for all of those. Now, we haven't actually added the user interface, just the UI code for the health checks in the same health checks. So with that, we have all of our health checks added, and we still have maintained our program.cs at 21 lines. We've got a bunch of stuff in here, and yet it's very easy to see where everything is. Everything's in startup, and then specific things have additional stuff. So endpoints have their own folder, health checks have their own folder, data has its own folder, and models. So we've got a clean API here still, and yet we've added quite a bit of things to it. So now we can do a lot more testing with this API beyond just making GET calls to it. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to work on adding slowdowns to our code. So we want to simulate a true API. So sometimes you might want to see, what does my app do when the API doesn't return right away? What if I had a 5-second lag between when I made a call to the API and when it came back? Now our API is very fast because it's just getting JSON data in memory. And so there's not much to it, but we can add a simulated lag to it so we can see what happens. We can also add errors to our API. So you can say, hey, I want to see what happens when I get a 404 error, or I want to see what happens when I get a 403, an unauthorized error. And we're going to add those things as well in the next lesson. But until then, thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.